The grand lights of the arena felt warm, but Jason Statham felt a chill deep in his chest. Thousands of faces stared from the crowd, waiting for a laugh, waiting for the moment. But nobody expected the cruel jab that had just come. Bill Maher, with his sharp tongue and confident grin, stood a few steps away on the grand stage. He had just mocked Jason, not in jest, but in a way that cut deeper than any blade. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bill had sneered, voice loud in the microphone, "we have Jason Statham here tonight, famous for beating up bad guys on screen, but in real life, let's just say, not so tough." The crowd chuckled nervously. Some laughed too loud, eager to follow the lead of the famous host. Jason's jaw tightened. He could feel his heart pounding, not from fear, but from something older, something deeper. Years of quiet struggle, of being underestimated. He swallowed hard, glancing briefly at the crowd. Faces blurred, but one face stood out. A little boy in the front row, holding a worn-out poster of Jason, eyes wide with hope. Jason's hands curled into fists, not for violence, but for dignity. Tonight, he thought, they will know who I really am. Jason took a slow breath, steadying himself. As Bill Maher continued his jokes, Jason's mind drifted, not away, but deeper into his heart. He remembered his younger days, standing on the cold streets of London, struggling just to survive. He remembered the heavy boxes he carried as a young man, his back aching, dreams weighing even heavier. He thought of his mother who had once told him, "Jason, people will laugh at you until they have no choice but to respect you." Now standing under the bright lights, with Bill's mockery echoing in his ears, those words felt like a shield. The arena was silent for a beat. Jason could almost feel every eye waiting for his reaction. Cameras zoomed in. Breaths were held. He looked at Bill, who smirked, thinking he had won. But Jason wasn't angry. No, he was calm. Heartbreakingly calm. He took a step toward the microphone, and in that small movement the atmosphere shifted. The audience leaned in as if drawn by an unseen force. Jason's voice, when it came, was steady but soft. "Bill," he began, eyes clear and strong, "do you know what it feels like to be laughed at your whole life?" A hush fell over the arena. Jason's question hung in the air like a heavy cloud. The crowd, moments ago buzzing with shallow laughter, now sat in still silence. Even Bill Maher's smile faltered just a bit. Jason looked not at Bill but at the audience. His eyes swept across the faces, young, old, curious, doubtful. He saw the same looks he had seen all his life. "I was told I'd never make it," Jason continued, his voice trembling, not from fear but from memories long buried. "I was told I was too rough, too common, too poor to stand on a stage like this." His words were simple, but they hit the crowd like waves crashing against stone. "I cleaned toilets to pay for my lessons," he confessed. "I carried bricks on frozen mornings. I ate cold beans from a can because I couldn't afford more." A gasp rippled through the arena. Cameras caught the glisten of moisture in his eyes, and in the eyes of many watching. Jason's voice grew stronger. "But you know what I learned? It's not the laughter of others that shapes you. It's what you do after they stop laughing." The arena felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for the storm that was coming. Jason's words were like quiet thunder rolling through the packed arena. Bill Maher shifted on his feet. His smile, once wide and bright, began to shrink, little by little. The crowd, once eager for jokes, now listened with heavy hearts. Even the cameramen trained to capture the best angles found themselves caught between duty and emotion. They zoomed in closer, showing Jason's face, strong, but full of pain. "I stand here today not as a star," Jason said, his voice firm but full of feeling, "but as a man who was laughed at every step of the way." He paused, looking straight at the boy in the front row. The child clutched his poster tighter, his eyes glassy with tears. "My father worked 2 jobs just so we could eat," Jason continued. "My mother scrubbed floors so I could chase my dream." A few people in the audience wiped their eyes. This wasn't a speech. It was a mirror, showing them their own struggles, their own silent fights. Bill Maher cleared his throat, but no words came. Jason's story had begun to melt even the coldest hearts in the room. Jason stepped closer to the microphone. His hands, though steady, carried the weight of his memories. The lights above him shone bright, but he didn't see them. He saw his past, cold nights, heavy loads, days when he almost gave up. There were days, Jason confessed softly, when I thought I'd never make it. Days I cried alone, hiding from the world. Not because I was weak, but because I felt forgotten. The arena grew colder in silence. I know many of you here, he said, looking at the older faces in the crowd, have felt the same pain. You've worked hard all your life. You've carried your families on your backs. And still, people laugh. Tears welled up in the eyes of many elders in the audience. Some nodded, their hands clutching tissues, their hearts aching with memories of their own journeys. Jason's voice trembled, but he did not stop. Bill, you joke about my life because it looks easy now, but it was never easy. And for those of us who have walked through the fire, jokes do not burn us anymore. A soft wave of applause began, slow but growing. Jason's truth was turning the tide. The soft applause grew louder, stronger, like a heartbeat rising from deep inside the room. Jason's eyes shined with unshed tears, but he stood tall. He wasn't acting. He wasn't performing for the cameras. He was simply telling the truth. For years, he said, his voice thick with emotion, I wore pain like a second skin. People like Bill here, they see the fame. They don't see the nights I went hungry. They don't see the days my mother prayed for me, on her knees, with tears in her eyes. Jason paused, swallowing the lump in his throat. And they don't see, he continued, the strength that pain has given me. The crowd rose one by one. What had started as small claps turned into thunderous applause. Tears fell freely from faces young and old. Even security guards at the edge of the arena wiped their eyes, moved by Jason's raw honesty. Bill Maher, once so sure of his place, looked small in comparison. His eyes darted nervously as the energy in the room shifted. Jason's story had become their story. The arena was no longer a stage for jokes. It was a stage for truth, and the truth was shining brighter than ever. The air inside the arena grew heavier. People were not just watching anymore. They were feeling every word Jason spoke. Bill Maher, who had been so quick with his jokes, now kept quiet. He shifted the microphone between his hands, his eyes flickering between Jason and the restless crowd. Jason's eyes did not leave the audience. He spoke not just to them, but for them. For everyone who had ever been mocked, belittled, or pushed aside. I came from nothing. Jason's voice cracked softly, but it still carried across the whole hall. People like me were not meant to stand on stages like this. We were meant to stay in the shadows. A tear rolled down the cheek of an old man in the front row. He, too, remembered hard days and cold nights. Jason's breath trembled, but he did not hide it. He let the emotion show, raw and true. I was the boy who cleaned gym floors just to watch others train, Jason confessed. They laughed at me, but I kept going. The crowd leaned closer, almost as if they could feel the weight of every step Jason had taken in life. And then, Jason raised his voice. Jason's next words thundered through the arena. No one believed in me, he declared, his voice firm, rising above the silence. But I believed in myself. The crowd, once frozen, began to stir. Some wiped tears from their cheeks. Some nodded, their faces full of quiet respect. Jason's eyes glistened, but he refused to let the tears fall. I trained in the cold, fought when I was tired, and stood back up every time life knocked me down, he continued. They said I was just a street boy. They said I would never be a star. A soft gasp came from the audience. But here I stand, Jason said, raising his arms slightly. Not because of luck, not because of easy paths, but because I never let their laughter stop me. Bill Maher's smirk was gone. He stared at Jason, speechless, as if he too felt something shift inside. Jason's voice softened, deep with feeling. Tonight is not about me. Tonight is about everyone they've laughed at. It's about you. The crowd erupted in soft, emotional applause. Some couldn't hold back their tears anymore. Jason had done more than defend himself. He had touched their hearts. Jason's eyes swept the sea of faces once more. He saw more than an audience. He saw people carrying their own quiet pain, their silent battles. "You see me now," Jason said softly. "But there was a time no one saw me at all." The room hushed completely. Even Bill Maher, once ready with clever words, had none left. Jason's voice trembled, not from fear, but from deep truth. "When I walked the streets alone with holes in my shoes, no one cared. No cameras, no applause, just cold nights and hunger." A woman in the front wiped her tears with a trembling hand. Jason's eyes glistened. "I speak today not just for myself, but for every person who feels invisible." He turned toward the cameras, knowing millions might watch this moment later. His voice grew stronger. "For the man who works 2 jobs and still goes to bed hungry. For the mother who skips meals so her children can eat." The crowd was no longer clapping. They were feeling. This wasn't a show anymore. It was a lifeline for everyone who ever thought they were alone. Jason took a deep breath. "You know, people see my smile today and think life was easy," he said, his voice shaking slightly. He paused and let the words settle in the heavy air. "But behind every smile is a scar," Jason continued, his eyes lowering for a moment, remembering. "I lost people I loved because I couldn't afford to save them." A wave of quiet sorrow passed through the crowd. "I watched my father work himself to the bone, only to die before seeing my success," Jason said, his voice cracking. "My biggest regret is that he's not here to see this day." An older man in the audience broke down quietly, clutching a handkerchief to his face. Jason let his tears fall freely now. He didn't wipe them away. He let the whole world see them. "And my mother." Jason's voice trailed off, heavy with grief. "She used to say, 'Jason, you are my hero, even if the world never knows your name.' Now, the world knew. And yet at that moment, Jason looked small, like a son still longing for his mother's hug. The whole arena sat frozen in deep emotion. Jason's eyes, wet with tears, met Bill Maher's. Bill, usually full of quick comebacks, had none left. His face softened, almost like he regretted the joke that had started all of this. Jason didn't speak to him with anger. Instead, he spoke with something deeper, quiet strength. "Bill," Jason said gently, "I know you thought it was just a joke. But every joke carries weight, especially for those who have carried too many burdens already." The arena held its breath. "I do not need to hit back with fists," Jason continued, his voice clear. "The weight of my story is stronger than any punch." Slow, sincere applause began to ripple through the audience. Not loud, not wild, but full of heart. Jason turned back to the crowd, speaking not as a star, but as one of them. "I stand here for the unheard," he said, "for the unseen, for the forgotten." Tears streamed down many faces now. Jason's pain had become their own. And in that moment, the line between celebrity and crowd disappeared. There was only shared human truth. Jason raised the microphone with a trembling hand, but his voice grew stronger. "One voice," he said, pausing to let the words echo, "can light a fire in the darkest night." The arena was no longer an audience. It had become part of his story. Jason's gaze swept over them like a warm embrace. He spoke slowly, so every word could sink deep. "Each of you," he continued, "carries your own pain. Maybe people laugh at you. Maybe they ignore you. Maybe they think you don't matter." His breath caught, but he pressed on. "But tonight," Jason declared, voice rising, "you matter." People began to stand, slowly at first, then more and more. "You matter," Jason repeated, tears rolling down his cheeks. "Because you are stronger than their words, stronger than their laughter." The crowd erupted into a standing ovation, not for a performance, but for the truth Jason had shared. Bill Maher stood too, but not as a host. He stood as a man humbled by the weight of what he had just witnessed. And Jason? He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in the unity of the moment. The arena had become a family. The cheers slowly faded, but the emotion in the arena stayed thick in the air. Jason held the microphone close to his chest for a moment, like it carried not just sound but memories. Then, in a quiet voice, he spoke. "There's something I never told anyone before," Jason began, looking down at the stage floor as if his memories were written there. "Not even in my interviews, not in my books." The crowd leaned in, breaths caught in their throats. "I once thought of giving up," Jason admitted, his voice raw and honest. "There was a day I stood on a bridge alone, thinking the world would never notice if I was gone." Gasps filled the arena. A woman pressed her hands to her mouth, eyes shining with tears. Jason's voice cracked. "But then, I remembered my mother's words. Hold on, Jason. Hold on until the light returns." He wiped his cheek, but another tear followed. "I did," he said softly. "I held on." The arena sat in complete silence. And in that stillness, hearts broke and healed all at once. Jason had just reached into the souls of his audience and wrapped them in his courage. Jason raised his eyes again. They were red, swollen with tears, but shining with something even brighter. Hope. "Maybe that's why I'm standing here today," Jason said, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "Not because I was the strongest, not because I was the fastest, but because I refused to let go of hope." The arena, packed with thousands, felt like a small room, as if Jason spoke to each person, heart to heart. He turned slowly, looking at every corner of the audience. "To everyone who feels forgotten," Jason continued, "to the ones carrying quiet battles inside, you are stronger than you know." Tears streamed down faces, old and young alike. Even Bill Maher, caught in the moment, lowered his eyes in quiet respect. Jason took a breath, deep and full, as if drawing strength from the very air. "Don't let them tell you who you are," he declared, his voice now a roar of quiet power. "Don't let the world's laughter drown out your inner fire." The crowd stood again, this time not just in applause but in unity. They were no longer strangers. They were one. And Jason was their voice. Jason's chest rose and fell as he took one last step toward the front of the stage. The lights above him burned bright, but they could not outshine the fire in his heart. "Tonight," Jason said, his voice trembling but proud, "I did not come here to win a debate or outshine anyone." He paused, looking directly at Bill Maher. "I came here to remind every person watching," Jason continued, "that no matter how hard life pushes you down, you can rise again." The arena erupted in applause, but Jason raised his hand gently, and the crowd quieted. He looked to the little boy in the front row, the boy with the worn poster, now wet with tears. Jason's voice softened, warm like a father's embrace. "To the young ones watching, never let the cruelty of others steal your dreams." The boy nodded, wiping his face, holding the poster tighter than ever. Bill Maher, silent, lowered his head in quiet respect. Jason finished with words that shook every soul in the room. "And to all of you," Jason said, voice breaking with emotion, "if I could rise from nothing, so can you." The arena exploded in tears and cheers. The lights seemed brighter now, as if they too wanted to honor this moment. Jason stood tall, but his eyes were full of tears. He did not wipe them away. He let them flow freely, like rivers carrying years of pain and victory together. "My father's hands were rough," Jason began, his voice soft, "from years of hard work. He never held fame or fortune, but he held me when I cried." The crowd grew quiet again, their hearts in their throats. Jason's gaze drifted upward as if speaking to heaven itself. "Dad, I hope you see me now," he whispered. "I hope you see that your struggle was not wasted." A woman in the audience sobbed, clutching a picture of her late husband, feeling Jason's words as her own. Jason turned back to the crowd, his voice shaking. "To every parent, every worker, every dreamer in this room, your sacrifices are not in vain." The applause started softly, but swelled into something beautiful. It was not just noise. It was the sound of thousands of hearts all beating together, as tears fell like quiet rain across the arena. Jason's story had become their own. Jason's chest filled with pride, not for himself, but for the people before him. He saw faces soaked with tears, hands over hearts, eyes shining with hope reborn. "This," Jason said, sweeping his hand across the arena, "is not my victory alone." He looked at Bill Maher, who now had tears in his own eyes. Bill stepped forward, microphone lowered, no longer a comedian, but a man humbled by truth. "This," Jason continued, his voice strong and full, "belongs to every single person who has been laughed at, doubted, pushed aside, and told they were not enough." The crowd erupted once more, rising to their feet. Jason's voice rose with them, lifting the entire room higher. "You are enough. You've always been enough." The little boy with the crumpled poster shouted, "You're my hero, Jason." Jason's eyes softened. He placed his hand over his heart and gave a small nod to the boy. For a moment, it felt like time stopped. The arena wasn't just a place of entertainment anymore. It had become a house of healing, a room full of everyday heroes rising to their own power. And Jason, once mocked, now led them as their champion. Jason stepped to the very edge of the stage, the crowd still standing, faces wet with tears but bright with hope. With one final deep breath, he spoke words that would stay with them forever. "Carry your scars with pride," he said, his voice filled with fire. "Let them remind you not of pain, but of power." The applause roared like thunder, but Jason raised his hand once more for silence. "And when the world tries to laugh at you," Jason said, looking directly into the cameras, "stand tall, look them in the eye and say, 'I am more than your words.'" Bill Maher, visibly moved, lifted Jason's hand into the air like a champion. The crowd cheered wildly, many crying openly. Jason's eyes softened with warmth. "My friends," he said gently, "if this moment touched your heart, if my story feels like your story, please share your thoughts below. Leave me a comment. Let me hear your voice." He smiled through his tears. And if you believe in second chances, in rising from nothing, give this video a like. Subscribe to our family here. Together, we rise. As the lights dimmed, hearts shined brighter than ever. Jason had not just won the crowd, he had healed them. If the story touches you in any way, share to friends. Don't forget to like and subscribe.